She came ready to take down Barron Trump with bold arguments, but when he calmly countered, her confidence began to crack. The air inside Stanford University's Memorial Auditorium crackled with anticipation. Every seat was taken, and dozens of students stood against the walls, craning their necks for a better view. The night's event had been the talk of campus for weeks, a highly anticipated debate between Barron Trump and Maya Thompson. Barron, the youngest son of President Donald Trump, had largely avoided the political spotlight for most of his life. But over the last year, he had stepped into the arena, making headlines for his sharp intellect and calm, methodical approach to political discourse. His supporters hailed him as a rising conservative voice, articulate, composed, and armed with facts. His opponent, Maya Thompson, was no stranger to the public eye either. A senior political science major and president of the Progressive Student Alliance, she was known for her passionate activism on campus. With her rainbow-colored hair and a reputation for fiery speeches, she had led multiple protests advocating for wealth redistribution, climate action, and tuition-free college. Many saw her as a future political leader, a fierce and unapologetic advocate for progressive causes. The debate topic was as divisive as it was relevant. Is capitalism still the best economic system for America? The crowd was split, with students from both ideological camps ready to cheer for their side. Some wore Keep America Great hats, while others sported Eat the Rich shirts. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the moderator, Dr. Evelyn Harris, stepped onto the stage. A highly respected political science professor, she had made it clear in pre-debate interviews that she would not tolerate interruptions or grandstanding. She adjusted her microphone and surveyed the audience before speaking. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we gather to debate a question that impacts every single one of us. In a world facing economic uncertainty, rising inflation, and debates over wealth distribution, the question of capitalism's role in America is more relevant than ever. The audience fell silent. Representing the affirmative position, arguing that capitalism remains the best economic system, is Barron Trump. Barron stepped forward in a tailored navy suit, exuding quiet confidence. He nodded politely toward the crowd, his expression composed. Representing the opposing viewpoint, arguing that capitalism has outlived its usefulness and must be replaced with a more equitable model, is Maya Thompson. Maya strode to the podium in a black blazer over a t-shirt that read People Over Profits. She pushed her brightly colored hair back and adjusted her microphone. Dr. Harris continued, Each debater will have 5 minutes for their opening statement, followed by rebuttals, cross-examinations, and closing remarks. Audience members, I remind you to be respectful. Let's begin. Maya stepped up first, eyes blazing. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Tonight we're not just debating theory, we're debating real lives. Real people. People who struggle to pay rent, who work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive, who watch billionaires hoard wealth while they decide between food and medicine. Capitalism, as we know it, is a rigged game, and it's time we face that truth. Scattered applause broke out from her supporters. She continued, For decades we've been told that hard work leads to success, but if that were true, why are millions of Americans drowning in debt while the richest 1% accumulate more wealth than the bottom 50% combined? The American dream is a lie designed to keep us complacent. More cheers erupted from the left side of the audience, but Barron remained unfazed. He folded his hands in front of him, waiting for his turn. Dr. Harris gestured toward him. Mr. Trump, your opening statement. Barron approached the microphone, took a brief pause, and then spoke in a measured, even tone. Maya makes an emotional argument, but emotion doesn't solve economic problems. Data does. The right side of the audience clapped. Capitalism isn't perfect, no system is. But history has proven one thing. Capitalism is the most effective system for lifting people out of poverty. You don't have to take my word for it. Look at the numbers. Compare free market economies to socialist ones. The difference is undeniable. Maya smirked, folding her arms. Barron continued, You say the American dream is a lie, but tell me this, why do millions of people risk everything to come to America? If capitalism were such a failure, wouldn't they be running in the opposite direction? The audience murmured. Even some on Maya's side shifted in their seats. But the real fireworks were about to begin. Maya didn't miss a beat. She stepped forward, gripping the edges of the podium as she fired back. People come to America because they have no other choice. They flee violence, war, and failing economies, most of which were destabilized by American corporations seeking profit. Capitalism isn't lifting people up, it's exploiting them. Her words landed hard, and the left side of the auditorium erupted in cheers. She pressed on. You want data, Barron? Here's some data. The top 1% of Americans own more wealth than the entire middle class combined. Wages have stagnated for decades while the cost of living has skyrocketed. CEOs make 300 times more than their workers, yet conservatives call it free enterprise instead of what it is, economic oppression. She turned toward the audience, sweeping her hand dramatically. And let's not forget the environmental cost. Capitalism prioritizes profit over the planet. Climate change is accelerating because billion-dollar industries refuse to slow down their destruction. You think the system is fair? Then why is it that the people who work the hardest, teachers, nurses, factory workers, are the ones struggling the most? More applause. Maya lifted her chin, confident that her message had struck a nerve. But Barron still wasn't fazed. He waited a beat, then adjusted the microphone slightly before speaking in a calm, almost casual tone. Let's break that down, shall we? Silence fell across the room. You blame capitalism for all of America's problems, but what's the alternative? Socialism? Communism? Name one country where those systems have produced better results. Venezuela? Cuba? The Soviet Union? How did those experiments end? A few murmurs, a shift in energy. Some of Maya's supporters frowned, sensing where this was going. You mentioned income inequality, Barron continued. And you're right, the wealth gap exists. But you know what else exists? Upward mobility. The richest people in America weren't always rich. Elon Musk came here with nothing. Oprah Winfrey grew up in poverty. Jeff Bezos started Amazon in a garage. The reason America is still the most prosperous nation in the world is because capitalism rewards hard work and innovation. Maya narrowed her eyes, tapping her fingers against the podium. You keep mentioning the 1%, Barron said. But let's be honest. Most people in this room, in this country, live better than 90% of the world. The so-called poor in America have iPhones, cars, Netflix subscriptions. Go to a truly socialist country and see what real poverty looks like. A shift. This time, the right side of the audience clapped louder. Maya leaned in, her voice sharp. So you're saying struggling Americans should just be grateful that they're not starving in a third world country? That's your argument? It could be worse? Barron shook his head. No, I'm saying that demonizing capitalism while enjoying every benefit it provides is hypocritical. The words hung in the air. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but something in the room had changed. A tension neither side could ignore. And for the first time that night, Maya hesitated. Maya exhaled sharply, gripping the edges of the podium. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, not with logic that landed as cleanly as Barron's, but she wasn't going to back down. Hypocritical? She repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. So because I live in a capitalist society, I can't criticize it? That's ridiculous. By that logic, you shouldn't criticize socialism if you've never lived under it. A few cheers erupted from her side of the room. She pressed on. Capitalism doesn't reward hard work. It rewards those who already have wealth. It's why billionaires keep getting richer while minimum wage workers can barely afford rent. You want proof? Explain how someone working 40 hours a week still can't afford a one-bedroom apartment in most cities. Explain why someone with 3 jobs still has to rely on food stamps. A louder cheer. Barron nodded slightly, acknowledging her point, but he wasn't rattled. Maya, you're making the mistake of thinking wealth is static, like a pie that only has so many slices. That's not how economics works. Wealth is created. If someone becomes a billionaire, it doesn't mean they took money away from the poor. It means they provided value that people were willing to pay for. Maya crossed her arms. Oh, please don't feed me that job creator nonsense. Billionaires hoard their money. They don't reinvest in workers, they exploit them. Barron raised an eyebrow. Really? So why is it that countries with the highest number of billionaires also have the highest standard of living? If billionaires were the problem, then why do socialist countries, where wealth is supposedly shared, end up with everyone equally poor? The right side of the audience clapped again. Barron wasn't just debating. He was controlling the rhythm, dictating the energy in the room. Maya wasn't done yet. She took a deep breath and went for an emotional appeal. You talk about numbers, but what about real people? You've never had to choose between paying rent or buying groceries, have you? You've never had to worry about medical bills. You live in privilege, Barron. You don't get to lecture struggling people about hard work when you were born into wealth. A loud cheer erupted from her side. A few people in the audience shouted in agreement. Barron sighed, shaking his head slightly. Ah, the privilege argument. The idea that because of my background, my opinions don't count. Let me ask you something, Maya. Do facts change based on who's saying them? If I were born poor and said the same things, would you listen to me then? Maya hesitated, but Barron didn't let the pause linger. You keep bringing up struggling people, and you're right. There are struggles. But the solution isn't to tear down a system that has lifted more people out of poverty than any other in history. The solution is to fix the parts that are broken while keeping what works. Do you really think government control is the answer? Because history shows that when the government takes over the economy, the only ones who get richer are the politicians. Maya opened her mouth to counter, but there was a moment, a flicker, where she realized the audience wasn't as firmly in her corner anymore. Barron was turning the tide, and she knew it. Maya shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The confidence she had started with was still there, but it had been chipped away, little by little. She had prepared for this debate, she had memorized statistics, she had practiced rebuttals. But Barron wasn't just throwing numbers at her. He was forcing her to confront contradictions she hadn't fully considered. Still, she wasn't going to let him walk away with an easy win. You keep acting like capitalism is some great equalizer, she shot back, her tone sharpened by frustration. But what you're really defending is a system that allows billionaires to accumulate wealth while people suffer. How is that fair? How do you justify an economic model where CEOs make hundreds of times more than their employees, while those employees can't even afford basic health care? Loud applause followed. Maya looked out at her supporters, feeding off their energy. Let me make this simple for you, Barron. You keep talking about wealth creation and opportunity, but let's be real, capitalism only benefits the people at the top. If it were truly fair, then why is it that the richest people in America keep getting richer while the middle class shrinks? A few people in the crowd murmured in agreement. It was a familiar argument, one that resonated deeply with those who felt the economy was rigged against them. Barron remained calm. Too calm. He exhaled slightly, then looked her in the eye. Maya, let me ask you a simple question. If capitalism is as oppressive as you say, if the system is truly rigged against everyday people, then why do immigrants from all over the world still risk their lives to come to America? Silence. Maya blinked. The room went completely still. She had an answer. She had to. But her mind suddenly felt like a blank slate. The way he had framed the question was so direct, so simple, yet she had never really thought about it from that perspective. Barron didn't press. He just stood there, waiting. Maya's lips parted slightly, as if a response was forming, but no words came. The pause stretched for a second. Then two. Whispers spread through the audience. Some students exchanged glances. Others checked Maya's expression, watching her closely. The moderator subtly shifted in her seat, clearly aware that the silence was becoming uncomfortable. Maya swallowed, finally managing. Because they're desperate. They don't have another choice. Barron tilted his head slightly. Exactly. They come here because capitalism gives them a chance. Not a guarantee, but a chance. If capitalism was the root of all their problems, they wouldn't be running toward it. They'd be running away. You call it oppression. They call it opportunity. More whispers. A few heads nodded. Maya inhaled sharply. She needed to regain control. Fast. That doesn't mean the system is fair, she snapped. People come here because America has more resources, not because capitalism is some magical solution. Barron shrugged. If resources alone were enough, Venezuela and North Korea would be thriving. But they're not. Because resources don't create wealth. Innovation, freedom, and opportunity do. And that's what capitalism provides. The weight of his words settled over the room. Maya looked out at the crowd, scanning for support. But something had changed. The applause wasn't as loud this time. Some of her own supporters had stopped clapping altogether. She had lost her footing, and Barron knew it. Maya could feel it, the shift. The energy in the room wasn't the same as before. She wasn't losing just the debate, she was losing the room. The confidence she had built throughout the night had begun to slip through her fingers. She cleared her throat, gripping the edges of the podium to steady herself. She needed to pivot, to regain control. Barron, you keep pointing to failed socialist experiments as if that's my argument. But I never said we should turn America into Venezuela. I'm talking about responsible regulation, about making sure corporations don't exploit workers. Why is it that in the wealthiest country in the world, we still have millions of people struggling to afford basic necessities? A few cheers came from her side of the audience. It was a good attempt, redirecting the conversation, reframing her stance. But Barron didn't look fazed. Maya, no one is saying capitalism is perfect, no system is. But let's be real, you're not arguing for responsible regulation. You're arguing against the very foundation that allows people to succeed on their own merits. You want the government to step in and correct capitalism, but where does that end? How much control is too much? Maya opened her mouth to answer, but Barron wasn't finished. Look, you talk about inequality, about people struggling, and sure there are problems, but here's the thing, you're acting like capitalism is the reason people struggle, when in reality it's the reason they even have the chance to succeed in the first place. You think government control fixes things? The same government that mismanages social programs, that overspends trillions, that wastes money on bureaucracy? That's the system you want people to trust? Silence. Maya's jaw tightened. The crowd was listening now. Not just the conservatives, but the independents, the undecided students, the ones who had come in open-minded. You said earlier that CEOs make 300 times more than workers, Barron continued. Okay, let's talk about that. You know what happens when you force companies to redistribute wealth? They leave. They take their businesses elsewhere. Jobs disappear. Wages drop. The very people you claim to be fighting for, they suffer the most. A noticeable murmur spread through the audience. Maya's eyes flickered toward a group of students who had cheered her the loudest at the beginning of the debate. They weren't clapping anymore. She wasn't just losing the argument. She was losing the confidence of her own supporters. She tried one last time. So, what's your solution then, Barron? Just let capitalism run wild? Let billionaires hoard wealth while the middle class disappears? Barron shook his head. No, the solution isn't to burn the system down, it's to make it better, to encourage innovation, to create policies that reward growth without punishing success. You don't fix a struggling worker's paycheck by tearing down the person who signs it. You fix it by giving them more opportunities to grow, to move up, to create their own wealth. That's what capitalism does. The audience was silent, not because they were bored, but because they were thinking. Maya stepped back from the podium, her expression unreadable. She knew it. The debate was over. Maya stood still, gripping the podium as if holding on for stability. She had come into this debate expecting to dominate, to present capitalism as the root of all inequality and injustice. And yet here she was, not defeated but undeniably shaken. Barron hadn't beaten her by shouting louder or overpowering her with emotion. He had done it with calm, steady logic. He hadn't dismissed the struggles of working-class Americans. He had acknowledged them while offering a perspective she hadn't fully prepared for. And the audience had noticed. The moderator, Dr. Harris, finally broke the silence. "Thank you both for an insightful discussion. That concludes tonight's debate." A beat of hesitation, then applause. Some clapped enthusiastically, others hesitantly, as if they weren't sure how to process what they had just witnessed. But one thing was clear: Barron had made people think. Maya exhaled, running a hand through her brightly colored hair. She looked toward Barron, searching for arrogance in his expression. A smirk, a gloating look, but it wasn't there. He simply gave her a courteous glance, then stepped away from the podium. The debate was over, but its impact was just beginning. By the time students spilled out of Memorial Auditorium, clips of the debate were already circulating online. The moment Maya had hesitated, the question about immigrants and capitalism was spreading fast. Some called it a mic drop moment. Others argued that Maya had been caught off guard, not because she lacked intelligence, but because Barron had asked something she had never truly considered. Twitter exploded with reactions. Barron Trump just exposed the biggest flaw in anti-capitalist arguments. Brutal. Maya was passionate, but Barron came in with facts. This is why preparation matters. Not a fan of Trump's politics, but that was an incredible debate performance. Respect. Even mainstream news outlets picked up on the buzz. Conservative commentators hailed it as a masterclass in reason over rhetoric. Liberal analysts scrambled to reframe the narrative, claiming Maya had simply been put on the spot and deserved a rematch. But none of it changed the reality. People were talking. The most interesting reactions, however, weren't from the political diehards. They were from the undecided students. As Barron walked toward the exit, a few students approached him, not to challenge him, but to ask questions. Real questions. "Hey, Barron, I always thought capitalism was inherently corrupt, but some of what you said makes sense. What do you think about regulating corporations more fairly? I'm a Democrat, but I have to admit, you made me rethink a few things tonight." Maya, watching from a distance, overheard some of these conversations, and for the first time that night she wasn't angry. She was curious. Barron hadn't destroyed her. He had forced her to think, and that, more than anything else, was the true victory. By the next morning, the debate had taken on a life of its own. What had started as a student-organized event at Stanford had now become a national conversation. Clips of Barron Trump and Maya Thompson were being shared across multiple platforms: Twitter, X, YouTube, TikTok, Rumble. Conservative channels hailed Barron as a rising intellectual force, while liberal commentators scrambled to control the damage, insisting that Maya had been caught off guard and needed another chance. But no amount of spin could erase what had happened. The viral moment, the silence, the hesitation, the realization, had already cemented itself in the minds of millions, and the reactions weren't just coming from the usual partisan circles. A surge of students, particularly independents, started questioning the economic narratives they had been fed. Many weren't suddenly turning into die-hard capitalists, but they were realizing that the issue was more complex than they had previously believed. Online forums buzzed with debates mirroring the one Barron and Maya had just had. "I always believed capitalism was just about greed, but now I'm wondering, why do people still risk everything to come to America if it's so bad? Not saying I agree with Trump's politics, but this guy was prepared. That was impressive." Maya made good points, but she got stuck. If capitalism is so broken, what's the real alternative? And then there were the responses from high-profile figures. Elon Musk, never one to stay silent on economic discussions, retweeted a clip of the debate, adding his own commentary. "Facts don't care about feelings. Solid argument, Barron." Joe Rogan, on his podcast the next day, addressed the moment. "That question was brutal. I mean, I get what Maya was trying to say, but that pause? That was the moment she realized she didn't have an answer." That's why debates matter. It forces you to think beyond the talking points. Even Bill Maher, a liberal but often critical of progressive narratives, chimed in. Capitalism isn't perfect, but it's still the best system we've got. This debate just exposed how little most people actually understand about economics. Meanwhile, Maya Thompson found herself in an uncomfortable position. Her usual supporters expected her to fire back, release a statement, do an interview, something. But what could she say? Any attempt to dismiss the moment would only make it worse. Instead, she took a different approach. In an Instagram post the next evening, she wrote, "Debating is about growth, about learning. I went in thinking I had all the answers, but last night showed me that no one does. I still believe in my principles, but I also believe in questioning everything, even the things I'm most certain about. Thanks to everyone who has supported me. Let's keep the conversation going." The post sparked even more discussion. Some praised her for humility. Others accused her of backtracking. But one thing was clear: she wasn't ignoring what had happened. And neither was the rest of the country. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a cultural moment. A week had passed since the debate, but the conversation hadn't died down. It had only grown. News outlets continued to analyze the exchange, with pundits on both sides trying to spin it in their favor. But beyond the media noise, something more important had happened. People were thinking. This wasn't about Barron Trump destroying Maya Thompson. It wasn't about a Republican versus Democrat showdown. It was about what happens when a real discussion takes place, when ideas are actually tested instead of just repeated. And that was what made this debate different. For years, political discourse on college campuses had been predictable. People spoke in echo chambers, clinging to the same arguments without ever truly questioning them. But what happened at Stanford? It forced everyone in that room, and millions more online, to stop and reconsider. Some students who had never questioned capitalism before began researching it for the first time. Others who had always supported progressive policies started asking harder questions. And even Maya herself, though she stood firm in her beliefs, admitted that she had more to learn. That was the real victory. It wasn't about who won or lost. It was about breaking through the noise, about proving that debate still matters, that facts, reason, and logic still have a place in a world dominated by emotion-driven discourse. Barron didn't leave the debate feeling like a conqueror. He didn't need to. He had done what so few people do these days. He made people think. And that was something no viral clip, no news spin, and no partisan headline could ever take away. In today's world, it's easy to pick a side and stick to it. It's comfortable. It's simple. But real progress, the kind that actually changes minds and shapes the future, comes from asking the hard questions. So ask yourself, do you actually understand the beliefs you hold? If someone challenged you right now, could you defend them with logic and reason? Or are you just repeating what you've been told? The difference between winning an argument and understanding the truth comes down to one thing: preparation. So next time you find yourself in a debate, don't just talk. Listen, learn, be ready. Because when the moment comes and someone challenges your beliefs, you'd better have an answer. Enjoyed this story? Make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into real-world debates, politics, and the moments that make people rethink everything. See you in the next one.